And here she is, Sarah Carter. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Wow, so calm and so composed. Sarah, I'm going to start out like I do for a lot of my shows. Tell us what you do in your own words.
I am president of a small business, Noztech, which I think if you Google that, you'll see that it starts with a G and not an N as it's pronounced, and that trips a lot of people up. Small business Noztech. We're headquartered just north of Philadelphia and have an office outside of San Diego. We're a service disabled, better known small business that specializes in software development, systems integration, and cybersecurity, particularly for the Navy, on tactical systems.
Okay, we're going to dig into the technology a little bit, but let's let me back up to the president part, because not everybody can say they're a president. How did this come about?
Definitely an evolution. I've been with Noztech for over 10 years. I say kind of tongue in cheek, Noztech inherited me, and I came to them back in 2012. Started out as a systems engineer, actually specializing in weapon system certification and combat system certification. And it was because of that specialty that I tongue in cheek that Noztech inherited me. And then just kind of had an itch to do more. So started taking on program management responsibilities, leading some teams, digging into some of their software development activities. I should say our software development activities. At the time, it felt like their software development activities. And then Noztech went through quite a shakeup with the unexpected passing of the founder and the president and CEO, Alan Fesnick. And at that time, it gave me an opportunity to kind of lean in. And at that time, I stepped up into the vice president role. I held that role for many years. And just this past calendar year, I stepped up into the president role. Our CEO and owner, James Espino, had that title of president and CEO for many years. And we've just reached a point where it made sense for us to divide out the two of those responsibilities, where he's focused more on the CEO activities. I would caveat that as more strategic thinking, whereas the president, I'm focused on near-term and tactical responsibilities.
When you dealt with the loss of a founder, which does happen in a lot of small companies, did you feel like there was a succession plan that immediately unfolded, or did this catch everybody off guard?
It was unexpected. Now, to Alan's credit, he was in the middle of succession planning. And so I'm warning you, this is going to take us down a rabbit hole, but I'll try to make it as quick and succinct as I can. James Espino had come into the picture exactly 12 to 13 months after I onboarded at Noztech. And his whole purpose of coming on board was a succession plan for Alan. In parallel, during that time frame, the two of them had pursued ESOP and gone out to the BISTAR Institute out in San Diego, and were exploring that. At the same time, Alan also had engaged in an LOI with another defense company out of the Colorado Springs market. And then kind of third is that he had a senior panel of folks who had been with him since the beginning. And the intent was always for those gentlemen to step up and take on Noztech, as well as Alan had 2 children. And it was only after it was apparent that neither the children nor the senior engineers wanted to take over Noztech did Alan bring on James and start looking at other exit plans, other succession plans for him. He was at the point of retiring. Unfortunately, none of those things were able to be implemented or really fully planned and executed prior to his unexpected departure in 2014. So a little bit of
Alan
a
was
loophole there
actually,
for a while.
he was actually deep into succession planning, it seems.
Yeah, no, he knew he needed an exit strategy. And he was in the process of figuring out what the best plan was. And so he was definitely planning, but a specific option hadn't been selected, a certain path hadn't been selected. And so when he passed, it left things a little up in the air. The only thing that was actually tangible was that signed LOI. And so that ended up being the widow's and the family's course of action, was to follow through on that LOI and sell the company in the winter of 2014.
So at the time of this disruption, you were a program manager?
Yeah, I was. Fortunately, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how did that feel? Was there uncertainty in the air? Were people wondering what their futures were?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Alan was kind of the rock and the mainstay of the company. And I guess luckily, James had already come in. So there'd already been some disruption, right? It was already clear that we have a new leadership structure and someone in a leadership position that wasn't, who had not been part of the company for many, many years, like many of the others that are a part of the leadership team. I was fortunate, kind of like right all of this was unfolding, I was taking on more responsibilities, and Alan and I had definitely started to form a mentor kind of mentee relationship. And at one point, he even made the comment, like, you remind me a lot of my daughter. And so I was fortunate that I was kind of already stepping up, kind of as a more, I don't even know the right word, a more senior, not even senior, because that implies, I guess just maybe more of a trusted, like I really was leaning in and trying to do more, really engaged in the business, really wanting to know not only how do projects run, but how do businesses operate, all the things that you really kind of need to understand as a small business leader, because it's, and you've probably seen this, there are great small businesses who are great engineers and they can do great things, but being a good engineer doesn't necessarily make you a good small business owner, right? That, there's way more facets to just understanding engineering and how to execute a project task. And so I was already leaning in and doing more of those things. So it really, I was kind of already on the path to stepping into a VP kind of role when Alan passed.
I'm hearing words that I would associate with drive and self-motivation and sort of buy-in to what the company was all about. Some people are just participating in work. Others are trying to lead work and be part of change or leadership, or they want to be in charge. People do that in different ways. Some people are a bit Machiavellian. Others are reluctantly drawn in. It sounds like you fall somewhere in the middle there, in that you began to recognize that you might have the skill sets to step up, and others were seeing that in you and letting you know that they saw that in you. Is that a fair encapsulation?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the company, but also kind of personally, I have this mentality of run until tackled. And in a small business, there is always something to do. And so kind of with Alan and James's permission, I would see things that would need to get done and I would just kind of go do them. Now that can ruffle feathers, that can be disruptive, and you can definitely start stepping on toes, especially in a small business. And so I think to get that buy-in, you really have to be careful there. For me personally, it was a little bit of a triumph for me. The senior engineers at the time, we referred to them as the silverbacks. I mean, and the company was founded in 1981, so they've been with the company for.
Okay, I'm a little older than you. That one's hitting a little close to home.
I think it's a great phrase. I mean, we use it in the company now, but it's, I mean, go ahead.
There was a term, I think it still exists, of graybeards. The graybeards would sit around the table.
Council. Yeah. Same idea. And so, I mean, these guys had been around forever. They knew where the bodies were hid, but they were they were and are great engineers and great project leads. And so I really worked hard at gaining their respect technically, in addition to all the other things. That's always been very important to me. Like, if I'm going to come to the table, I'm going to be, as technically proficient as I can, as to garner that respect. And I think in the process of that, it does help when you are leaning forward and perhaps stepping on toes. If you can do it in a way that shows you're looking to gain knowledge and honor other people's knowledge, then it helps. I'm not saying it doesn't, there's still not going to be, you might not ruffle feathers still, that may still happen, but I think it helps to show that you're coming from a good place, a genuine place of wanting to learn and improve and do better, rather than a more Machiavellian, as you put it, approach.
You joined Nostech from one of the big primes.
Mhm.
At least I'm tracking your biographical profile. Can you tell me about that transition and what might have been in your head at the time? Could you even see yourself as a future president of a defense company?
At that time, no. So I separated from the Coast Guard in 2008 and was very, very fortunate to land at GDIT in a government oversight role on site at Lockheed Martin of the Coast Guard's, at the time it was called Deepwater Project, which was the recapitalization of all of the surface, air, and C4ISR suites and platforms. And so that program, Deepwater, ended up kind of becoming a negative word, just because of the way the Coast Guard set it up. But what it really drove was the opportunity that I walked in, which was providing Coast Guard oversight to what was going on for the C4ISR suite that Lockheed Martin was developing for the Coast Guard. Now, coming out of the Coast Guard, I'd only, graduated the academy, did my 5 and dive, separated. And so I knew nothing about acquisition. What I knew about software development and systems engineering really, just came from the academy. I was not and am not an engineer by trade. And so going into that role, I just could not have been more blessed to have found that, because it taught me all of the things you need to know about what it means to be a defense contractor. How does a contract get executed? How does the government perceive it from that side? But being in industry, you could also very well understand Lockheed Martin's side and what all needed to get done. That project in particular, you got to see that the dynamics and how politics influence, and I'm not talking about big politics P, but how organizational politics come into play. And so I spent, how long did I spend there? 3-4 years there, and it was fabulous. It was exactly what I needed. I will say I attribute almost everything. The technical director there was a gentleman by the name of Steve Hishowski. And Steve, I did everything I could to become his right-hand person. And in doing so, almost through osmosis, tried to learn as much as I could. And I just cannot, I look back on that. And if I never would have had that, it would not have set me up to do anything, like this going forward. I think I would have been in project work, but really starting to understand how does all these things come together for a small business that focuses on software development and systems engineering. I just would have been missing a huge piece.
We learned that mentorship is really a two-way street. It's one thing to seek out a mentor, but the mentor needs to see something in the mentee. There needs to be a demonstrated drive or enthusiasm or willingness, or you clearly had some raw material to work with, even if it wasn't the specific acquisition or engineering credentials. And I see this a lot. I've seen it over my career, where the most technically adept is not necessarily going to be the winner or someone who gets pulled up through the system. It's people who can work together, who can assimilate a lot of information, who want more responsibility and don't fear accountability, and they're judicious with how they exercise the authority that can come about as you gain that sort of expertise. It sounds like you fit the perfect blend there. What caused the transition from GDIT over to NOSTEC? Did you get hired away, or were you looking?
The contract was being downsized, and
Okay.
so it was that. So I mentioned earlier, NOSTEC kind of inherited me because it was at this time in Morristown, New Jersey, which is where the oversight was for the Coast Guard. The OIC there was at the time Commander James Espino, who now is CEO and owner of NOSTEC. And so I was fresh to GDIT, so fresh that I was still technically on terminal leave. And so when they went to get me a contractor CAC, they realized that I was actually a still commissioned Coast Guard officer. And so when they found that out, they didn't know that about my background. I'd been there maybe 3 weeks, maybe. And as wide-eyed as you could get. Steve Hashowski, James Estino pulled me aside and said, hey, we're in a conundrum with this weapon system certification. At the time, Coast Guard had received new requirements to be able to fully interoperate with a strike group. And I mean, those were requirements the Coast Guard never had. And James Espino looked at me and said, hey, you're going down to DC next week to represent this office. Do whatever needs to be done. And so that was really kind of my thing at the time in that office. And because back specifically to your question, even though the contract was being downsized, I had made myself at the time invaluable for that specific piece. And NOSTEC had a current contract. And so rather than risk losing that subject matter expertise to go find another position, whether it be within GDIT or on another contract or somewhere else, the Coast Guard found a way to get to me through NOSTEC. So that's what I mean by inherited.
Yeah. People say that you create your own opportunity, and to a degree that seems to be what has unfolded in your case, in that you were demonstrating capability and a willingness and an adaptability. Sarah, let me ask you to put your president's hat on and talk about the role of the president and what it is that consumes your day-to-day activities. And then I want to follow up on your perspectives on industry from your current position.
So wearing the president hat. So the nice thing for me, what I think it's a nice thing for a small business, is a president hat means you're wearing many hats. You're not wearing one hat. Now, your viewpoint that you approach and solve problems or try to be forward-looking is a different perspective within the organization because you are the president. But HR, more like, I would say, operations, right? Kind of something that maybe people would think more of like a COO or an operations manager, all those things, business development. So, hats on for capture and bid and proposal and finance and dealing with DCAA. The president's hat, is really many hats. But I think overall what you're doing, or what I am learning to do is probably how I should better phrase it, because I'm by no means do I have it figured out. And that's you're trying to keep everybody on the same sheet of music and keep everybody moving in one direction. And you're trying to make sure that everyone knows that their best interest is at heart, and you're doing what you can, to keep moving the ship in the right direction.
Do you have to resist the urge to jump into the things that the answers to? sometimes we spend time on things that we feel like we're best at, and we really need to be spending time on some of the things that we maybe least want to do. You mentioned HR, that's sometimes not so fun. Payroll and keeping the trains running on time is probably equally as challenging as any of the technical issues. But where are you most comfortable? Where do you spend your time?
I just want to say right now, I own that I am guilty of all those things.
We all are.
I can't remember who said it. Someone, I'm sure I was listening to a podcast or something, and they said, the big difference is you need to be focused on the business and not in the business. That's how you're growing and moving forward. And so I catch myself often defaulting to being in the business because that's my comfort zone. That's where I came up. Yes. And so I think when you're in a leadership role, whether it be president or just kind of higher up in the organization, it's important to remember to focus on the business and not in the business, and trust the people that you have in those roles to do what they need to do. Not easier said than done, because because what I'm finding out is it's hard focusing on the business. That's hard mental gymnastics. And what I'm learning is when you're in the business, that becomes mental clutter, and it doesn't allow you to rise up and focus on the business and do the hard thinking. And it's, for me, for someone, especially who's like type A or likes to have like a checklist, it's so easy to default to being in the business and checking things off. Oh, I got payroll approved today, or, oh, I addressed this, whatever. And you get to the end of the day and you have a sense of accomplishment, not because you achieved anything, but you check something off the list. I'm guilty. I am currently in the throes of working through that and what it means to focus on the business and step back and go, at the end of the day, I might have nothing to show for it, but I've done all these mental hurdles and I've gotten us closer to endpoint B, but that's not to say that it's still not far away or there's still not a lot of more work to be done. Yeah, sorry, reflection moment as you answered the question.
No, it's a great answer. Sometimes we have visions that we're working toward, or goals that we're working toward, and we find out it's just a moving horizon that keeps unfolding in front of us that we have to keep working at. I think it's a great answer. When you look across industry at, you don't have to name names, excuse me, but your peer companies, what do you see? Do you see similar challenges? Do you see different personalities? What are your reflections?
I think the challenges for small business are universal. So I think, some of the things that we're talking about, I think if you're a small business owner, you're in the throes of it and you know exactly what I'm talking about. I think so NASTEC primarily does Navy work. And I think if you're a small business right now doing work for the Navy, there is so much opportunity right now. I think we all know and have heard how many, I should rephrase, how many opportunities are being open to small business right now. And this idea of speed to the fleet is just a huge opportunity for capable small businesses to lean forward and help the warfighter, right? NASTEC's tagline right now is, mission focused for warfighter dominance. And small business right now can help the Navy. And to the Navy's credit, they are letting small business help the Navy. And I think that's huge. So if you're a small business right now, I hope everyone is seizing the opportunity that's being given to us.
You see people who are maybe a little slow on the uptake here and maybe missing the opportunity. When I say people, do you see companies that are failing to execute in this new order?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, yes. But But I think I would ask the question to those who I perceive to be failing. I think I would ask the question, like, what are your goals? Because arguably my perspective may not align with what their company goals are. There are certain companies that are great engineers and drive to remain small and drive to stay in their niche subject matter area, and they thrive in that. And so for them, perhaps taking advantage of some of these opportunities doesn't align with their company goals. And so my perception of them failing could be completely off. And so I think you really got to ask yourself, right, as a small business owner or leader, is what are our goals right now? And if your goals are to be moving and growing, especially in the information warfare domain, and you're not on that train, then you probably are missing it. And you really got to check in with your goals and see if you're executing to your goals.
Where do you turn to build your own credentials and understanding of business and how to succeed in this defense industry? What are the resources that you turn to?
I think it's huge to have a network of like you were saying, like-minded small businesses. I think in some ways we all have our pulse on a piece of what's going on. And so it's important to have trusted relationships where you can talk with a colleague and kind of align with where do you see, what do you see going on right now? I think you got to stay up on what's going on. That may mean so NOSTEC, and then through NOSTEC, individuals of NOSTEC, we are members of AFCEA, we're members of NDIA, we're members of WID, we're members of the Navy League. We are constantly engaging with these. I'm not sure if this is the right phrase, but at industry outreach groups and industry consortiums to understand what's going on. Use those tools, absolutely. Then we talk about, I've already spoken about the kind of your personal network, and then I think another component of that is I'm a huge fan of podcasts, and not defense ones per se. I mean, all over the board. You've got to, for me, that has been tremendous. Being able to listen to interviews with different leaders or businesses. There's a very popular one that, the How I Built This, for years I listened to that.
Love that.
Right. Like just for years, because you're like, okay, so this, this startup doing whatever, nothing related to me. But then you start listening to these founders' stories and you're like, oh, that resonates. There's a lot to be taken from that. And so maybe that's another piece, being open-minded to recognize,
So shout out to Guy Raz here. We can make a legitimate link to him of this podcast episode to make sure that it proliferates. But yeah, I agree that it doesn't have to be about defense to pick up those sort of lessons. Sarah, as we come to a close here, can you give us a book recommendation?
Oh, James Clear, Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits. There you go.
I read that one during COVID, and it's one that I've gone back to several times. I even have it both in hard form and on audiobook. And so that's one that as I read through, it really clicked for me. Some of the things he was saying, and the idea that you can do one minuscule thing and how it compounds and how you can change and move forward from that.
Well, I mentioned Dan Sullivan and other podcast episodes. Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy have a fairly recent book out called 10X is Easier Than 2X. And in the book, they talk about Atomic Habits and the making of Atomic Habits, the book, how that author took several years to make that book what it is. And because he invested so heavily in quality, it instantly resonated with the business community and became a bestseller. So a great recommendation for anyone who has not read Atomic Habits. Sarah, I appreciate you making time today. This is a start of a new season, and we hope that stories like yours will resonate. I know that when we come back in 100 episodes and ask for a recap, we're gonna find Sarah in an even better place. Who knows what the title might be? But thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.